So, today we're going to tear into something you probably never thought you'd see together, 6th grade math and the Old Testament. It's a really interesting mix.
Well, what you get is a pretty wild lesson plan, to be honest. See, we're diving into a real 6th grade lesson. It's supposed to teach a pretty standard math topic, but trust me, the way it goes about it is, well, it's anything but standard.
So, at its core, this whole thing is a lesson on multiplying fractions. You know, something every 6th grader has to learn. The main goal is to hammer home one single fundamental rule. But before we get to the really unique stuff, we got to break down the basic math principle it's trying to teach.
Okay, so what's the big idea here? The entire lesson really just boils down to one simple mathematical rule.
Yep, that's it. That's the whole concept. It sounds simple, right? But for a lot of kids, it's kind of weird because you're used to multiplication making things bigger, not smaller. So how do you show this in a way that makes sense? Well, let's just take a number.
All right, let's just start with 100. Nice, round, easy.
Okay, now we're going to multiply it by a fraction, one that's less than 1. We'll use 1/2 for this.
And boom, you get 50. See? The number shrank. It got smaller. That's the principle in action. But, and this is where it gets really good, this lesson doesn't just stick with plain old numbers.
This is where the lesson takes a hard turn. It completely ditches abstract numbers and instead wraps the math problems in stories. Stories about some of the most famous figures from the Old Testament.
So first up, we've got Abraham, and the problem tells us he has 20 sheep. Simple enough, right?
And here's where the math comes in. We're told to multiply that number of sheep by 2/3. So, what happens to Abraham's flock?
And you get 13.33. Now, I know what you're thinking. What on earth is 0.33 of a sheep? Fair point. But for the lesson, all that matters is the number went down. The quantity got smaller. And this pattern just keeps on going.
All right, next example. Now we're talking about Isaac, and he's got 15 wells. Again, a nice clear starting number.
And this time, we're going to multiply that by 3/4.
And look at that, once again, the number gets smaller, 11.25. So yeah, another weird decimal for well, but the key takeaway is the same. The number of wells decreased. You see what's happening here? This lesson is trying to make math feel less like, well, math, and more like a story you already know.
So after walking through these big examples, the lesson shifts gears a bit to make sure the idea really sticks.
So of course there's homework. Students got a bunch of problems, like 10 times 2/3 to really drill this in. And every single time, the answer was designed to be smaller. But the lesson doesn't just wrap up with homework. Oh no, it saves its biggest punch for the very end.
The final problem brings in Noah. Remember him? Saved 8 animals on the ark. Well, that number gets multiplied by 3/4, and the number of animals decreases to
6. Just 6. A nice, clean, whole number. So the math principle holds up one last time. But here's the twist. The lesson isn't really about the number 6. It's about the idea behind it.
And this is it. This is the big connection. The whole mathematical theme of numbers getting smaller, of things being taken away, is tied directly to this super famous verse from the book of Job.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. When you look at this whole thing, what is this teaching method really doing?
Well, it's a pretty clever strategy, isn't it? It's weaving together regular old math with religious text. And in doing that, it's doing more than just teaching fractions. It's using stories people know to make a tricky idea feel real. And more than that, it's framing this mathematical idea of decrease inside a very specific worldview, this idea of giving and taking away. The math itself, that's universal. But the story, the context, that changes everything.
And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on. It's not just about what we're taught, but how. This whole lesson is a really powerful reminder that makes you wonder, how does the story we tell change the numbers we see?